In this video, I'm going to show you how to get a really straight line in your blanket so you don't get that sometimes a curve if you're doing the first row too small. So you'll need Bernat blanket bag. I'm using Pink Dust for this one, and Vintage, we're going to make a baby blanket. So depending how big your blanket's going to be, you're going to need anywhere from 3 to 10 rolls. You want to have a measuring tape so that when you do make your stitches that you can measure out the size. So I don't do mine based on how many stitches. I actually do it based on the dimension I want to get, because there's going to be a little variation with each person. So the first thing you want to do is start with a slip stitch. So you're going to put the tail across your forefingers, bring the working yarn behind, cross over, and then underneath you're going to pull that through. Okay, and tighten up. So I like to make the first row a little bit smaller than my forefingers. So kind of like a squinched forefinger, and that works out to be about 2.5. Okay? You want to keep tension and keep them both the same as you make them. Okay? 3. I like to put it down on the table and hold it in place while I bring the working yarn through. You want to make sure it's uniform. So you want to see that each one is about the same. One, two, three, four, five, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I have 22 stitches, which I think is about the size that I want it to be. I also always give it like a little bit of a stretch, because it is going to stretch out when you make it. And here, so I'm at 32 and I want this to be about 35. So I'm going to add one more, which again is why I tell you that it's not based on the number of stitches, but rather the actual length. So that's why you want to have a measuring tape. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to flip it over, and we're going to work through the middle stitch here. So this first or last stitch just remains at the end. You're not going to work with that. You're going to work in the next stitch over, and you're going to put your yarn through that middle stitch. And this is where you'll see that it tightens the stitch a little bit, so you want to make them just a little bit bigger than you think. You're going to go through that middle stitch. Okay, and as you're pulling each stitch through, you want to make sure that you're not curving. So you can see that it's staying very straight, and now that makes me know that I've done the stitches big enough so that I won't have that C shape. Okay, so it's always this middle that you're pulling through. So if at any point you're getting that C shape where it's getting too tight and curving, then you need to undo it and do it again, because that will leave you with one end of your blanket in a C shape and not a straight edge. So, and I undo my blankets many times to get the perfect starting point. So now that you can see, we're gonna have it really straight, okay? This first stitch, you're gonna leave it to the side. This is what's gonna give you also that really nice edge. So that first one's gonna stay to the side and you're gonna work through the next one. Now, what I do for this row is I make it just a little bit shorter than the row I had done first. And I make sure that the stitches are close together so that you're gonna get a nice shape again. One of the most important things is to have consistency in your stitch sizes. And this row will also be an indicating row to tell you if you're going to see or if it's going to go straight. So we're really straight here. This part you don't have to worry about. So you're just pulling through the working yarn. And I like to unravel my yarn so that it helps me with maintaining the same amount of tension. So sometimes when you get to this end here, if it's too loose, you can twist it to tighten it up. And then you want to make sure to get that nice edge that you pull up that bottom loop and make sure this tension is good and that you've left enough space on this last one. Okay, and you could see again that we're going to end up with a really nice straight blanket. So I'm going to continue doing this until I get my 40 inches. So we're doing a 35 by 40, and you just repeat until you come to the last row, and I'll come back at that point and show you how we finish off the blanket. So when you get back to this first knot here, you want to make sure that you don't bring it in. You want to keep the next knot out. So you want to always have that one stitch facing out, and that will give you that nice side edge. So again, we're at the side here. You want to bring that yarn through and then pull it up to keep that straight edge. So again, always just giving a little tug and straightening out that side. This time we're going to join it by the burn method. So you want to just cut it and feel the little plastic. Okay. This does get a little bit hot, so if you don't like to do this method, you don't have to. You can do a tie-in method. And if you don't have a safe space to do it, then I would recommend doing a tie-in, which is also very easy. So you want to just hold it. You can feel that it'll melt together. Just give it a little bit. And then I always do the tug test, and we're good. To finish the blanket, the second last row you're going to do, you want it to be a little bit bigger than whatever your stitches have been. So your last row before you close, you actually want to get it just a little bit bigger. Okay, and you'll see why at the end. And also when we started the blanket, we did the first initial stitch a little bit longer than the rest of the blanket. So here, you just want to make sure that you have enough yarn to finish off. And if you want to figure out how much yarn you need, after you finish your last row, you should be able to double back on your blanket size, and that will give you enough yarn to close it off in the way that I'm going to show you. So we're just doing it a little bit bigger. Just a little bit longer. So what you want to do here is you go through your last loop, and then you're going to chain one. So you're going to take the working yarn and go through that loop and bring it up. And this is what's going to give you your perfect corner. Okay? So you finished the row, you went into the last one. On the last stitch, you chain one. Okay? And then you're going to bring that stitch over to the next one, put both your finger through both, and then you're going to bring the yarn through behind both stitches. And this one, you want to make sure that you're laying it down on the table and pulling it a little bit, because this is the other side where you can get a C shape in the opposite direction. So again, finger through, place it through the next one, and bring the working yarn through. Okay? So you can see that we're not pulling too tight. So if this was too short, then I would pull the blanket over, and that's where you're going to get the pull. So you want to give yourself enough that when you bring that stitch over to the next loop, there's no pulling. Okay? So you can be like a little bit lenient on what you're doing with the final stitches here. And again, you can always give it that little extra tug to make sure that there's nothing pulling in any direction. Okay. So you're just going to do this through each stitch. And you want to make sure they're uniform so that you don't have one like odd one out, too big or too small. Everything should always be as uniform as you can make it. You see how nice and straight that is? Okay, and then to finish off, you're in the last stitch here. Put those two together, and then you're going to pull the stitch through. You're going to take the working yarn and run it through that loop. I typically cut it off with a little bit of a tail, and then I cinch it tight. And at this point, I would just make sure this is tight, and then I will tie once. And then you can either cut it off here, you won't see it. I like to bring it back in through and tie it again somewhere in the blanket that you don't really see it. You don't have to do this step, but I like to do it. So I tied in just behind. Oh, actually, we're gonna do an edge on this blanket. Yeah, that's fine. So I just want to make sure I have my loops accessible. So I double knot. And then you just cut off right there. And then that typically just gets kind of worked into the blanket so you don't really see it. And now I'm just gonna tie off the first end as well. So I like to move up that stitch a little bit. And same, I find a spot in the back of the blanket and I just tie it off. And then you cut your end. And you have a beautiful straight edge blanket. Isn't that gorgeous? So thanks for tuning in. This is the final baby blanket. Perfect edges, straight on all four sides. Super cozy, 35 by 40, great for baby, great for reading nook, great for lap blanket. And I hope that you enjoyed, and make sure that you subscribe, like, comment, and show me your finished product. Tag me at Off by Heart Design on Instagram. I'd love to see what you've made. So thank you and stay cozy.